So let's start with our session. There are prayers on the screen. You can repeat with me. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Ukta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam श्री राधा कृष्ण पदान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान वितांश हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी विश्वभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वांछा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधु वैवच पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So welcome everyone to this Siksha program. We'll be starting with Bhagavad Gita chapter number 13, nature, the enjoyer and consciousness. So I assume that in the previous Shiksha sessions, you all have gone through the first 12 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, right? And now you're supposed to read, the 13th chapter, right? Is that true? Is that true? Yes. Can anyone speak? Can anyone speak?
Sorry, Prabhuji.
So I'm assuming that in the previous Shiksha sessions, you all have gone through the first 12 chapters, right? Of Bhagavad
Right.
Gita. Okay.
Yes.
So
12 round mala japa.
no. The first 12 chapters of Bhagavad
In
Gita.
Siksha, I mean to say that up to 12 round mala japa, we have done up to 12th chapter. So we will start from 13th chapter. Then.
Okay. Great. Okay. So so as you know, Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters talk about Karma Yoga, and then the next 6 chapters talk about Bhakti, and this particular from 13 to 18, it talks about Jnana, knowledge. So Krishna in 12th chapter he says that uh, within he's within everyone's heart and he gives knowledge. Okay, and he also says in 12.7, he also says that I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So how this happens? Because we are in this material world, we have to live in this material world, and we have to practice bhakti while living in this material world. And Krishna has made this material world. So there are laws of karma working. There are 3 modes working, and um, so there are 3 modes working. So how to live within that and continue doing our bhakti? So that's the part of jnana that we are going to read from chapter number 13. Okay. So let me just show you which all chapters we will do. So 13th chapter talks about our body, how it is composed, and how the super soul is there and how to achieve that super soul. Then it talks about the 3 modes of material nature in chapter number 14. Then yoga of the supreme, chapter 15. There it talks about the inverted tree, Vedic tree that we are living in. 16 is the divine and demonic qualities. We need to develop qualities so that we can come out of we can come out of we can achieve liberation. Then divisions of faith. There are various people in this world and they have different understanding. and different attitude, and they are matured in a very different degrees. So what happens to them, that is discussed. And the 18th is the conclusion, where again a lot of things are concluded. Karma yoga is concluded, Jnana yoga is concluded, and then ultimately bhakti yoga is concluded. So a lot of technical knowledge, you can say, is there in these 6 chapters. Okay. So before that you read this 6 chapters, right? The Dhyana yoga in actually 7, from knowledge of the absolute, attaining of the supreme, most confidential knowledge, opulence of the absolute, the universal form, and devotional service. This is bhakti. This is very much related to bhakti, where first Krishna gives his introduction. Who is he is the supreme lord, there are demigods, then how to attain that supreme, and then ultimately he gives the confidential knowledge that you should worship me, do bhakti to me. And then he starts saying that, I have among the best in this whole world, I am present. And then he shows his universal form, because he says I am the supreme, from me everything comes. And anybody can say like that, but nobody can show his universal form. So to prove whatever he has said, he shows his universal form. And then ultimately he talks about devotional service to him. Okay. So this is about bhakti yoga. Before that is about karma yoga. Arjuna didn't wanted to fight, he didn't wanted to do his duty. So Krishna had to explain him why one has to do his duty. So first he had to tell him, you are not the body but the soul, and it is the activity which decides the next bodies that you get. So that's why you need to do duty. Now how to do that duty? You do it in a detached manner, you do it in service to the Vishnu, then you don't get any reaction. So he talks about that in karma yoga, in transcendental knowledge. And then he says you have to become a yogi. A yogi, while doing work, will remain detached and will advance in spiritual life. And then he says the best yogi is one whose focus is me. And that's why he starts with his introduction from 7th. Why Krishna only? So, like these chapters are divided. Let's jump into chapter number 13. So, the way I will go is, we will read the translations, and we will read only some part of the purports, not the whole thing, because we may not be able to then complete only. So some part of the purports where I am highlighted, that we will read, and we will discuss. If you have any questions, you can interrupt me in between, and we will discuss that. Okay. So let's start. I will require volunteers to read. So please volunteer when I say to read. Okay. So in this chapter number 13, nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness, Arjuna says, oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, Purusha, field, and the field, and the knower of the field, and of knowledge, and the object of knowledge. The Supreme Person of Godhead said, this body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. So Arjuna is basically talking, is asking, what is this Prakriti? What is this nature? What is this things around me, this world? Who is the Purusha? Purusha means who is the enjoyer, who is the controller of this whole thing, who is enjoying all this whole thing. And what is the field? And the knower of the field. I'll explain what is knower and the field. And what is real knowledge? Is it the knowledge of material world, like the physics, chemistry, mathematics, finance? Is that the knowledge, or is something else? And why we have to learn this knowledge? What is the object of that knowledge? So first answer Krishna gives is that this body is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. So as we have learned from the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that we are not the external body but the soul, right? The spirit soul, and the spirit soul is taking new bodies. So when it is inside a body, that whole body is like a field, and he does activities in this field. Okay, and he knows about this field, so he's also the knower of this field. There is one more knower that we will discuss later, but he's also the knower of the field. Okay. Okay. Okay, can someone read this highlighted section?
I can read.
Okay, go ahead.
So this purport is by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification. And according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body or field of activity. Therefore, the body is called kshetra or the field of activity. For the conditioned soul, now the person who should not identify himself with the body is called kshetragna, the knower of the field.
Yeah, the knower of the field. Okay.
So it means that what was
Go
that,
ahead.
Prabhuji? It means that the soul gets a body to enjoy,
Yeah.
and that gets into the senses gratification. Once the body, because body is made of all these senses.
Right.
So finally, soul gets this body, and it start enjoying that particular senses,
Hmm.
and that is when it is entrapped into the material field of activity, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you look at this picture, you see this body is just a machine. It's a biomechanical machine, and these eyes are like camera. This bones, blood, everything is like pneumatic machines, and the legs are like the tire. The heart is the pump. The liver is like the radiator. You know, and within the heart sits the super soul, who
Right.
is using all these senses and he's driving this body. Okay, and next to him is the super soul, the Paramatma, four-handed form of Vishnu. So Arjuna is asking, what is this field? So this body is the field, and the soul is using this field to achieve something that he desires. Okay, and he knows about this body, so he is the Kshetrajna. And the super soul also knows about this body, so he is also the Kshetrajna. Okay, so according to the desire of the soul, he gets this particular kind of body. There are various bodies one can get. Um, One can get human body, animal body, you know, anything. He can get any species, from the demigods to the reptiles to the aquatics. He can keep moving into this depending on what his karma is and what his desires are. And it's like, sometimes he gets the body which is like a cycle, which is like a motorcycle, which is like a car, which is like an aeroplane, and he can then do various things in those bodies. It's like that. Okay. um let's get to the purport. So because he wants to enjoy, he wants to experience certain things, he gets a certain kind of body. So he gets a field. Here, take this field, and this is your field. You enjoy in this, try to control it. Okay.
It is like if you're a player of cricket, you will get a cricket field. If you're a player of football, you will get a football field, and you
Yeah,
should
that's
know
the
that field.
desire. Yeah, that's the
That's
desire.
the desire,
Huh.
and you should know the field. If I know that particular field, the pitch, then I am the knower of that field, and I can play better.
Yeah. Yes, that's somewhat like that. Yeah. So anyone else, can you volunteer to read this highlighted purport?
I can read, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay, go ahead.
It is described in the beginning, Dehinos mean that the living entity is within the body and that body is changing from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Kshetragya. Sometimes we think I am happy, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles, our clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called Kshetragya, the knower of the field of activities, and the body is called Kshetra, the field of activities itself.
Yeah. So, like we get different bodies like man, woman, dog, cat. Why? Because depending on our desire and karma, the super soul takes, okay, take this body, do whatever you want to do. Hmm? And by little contemplation, we can understand that I am separate from the body. How do we understand we are separate from the body? When we say, my hand, my body, or let's say my bag, me and my bag is different, right? Similarly, when I say my hand, me and my hand is different. Similarly, when I say my body, the body is different than me. So by little contemplation, we can understand this thing. So that's how we know about this kshetragya. When we say my car, we know about our car, our bike. We know our bike. That's a field of activity. Then we use that bike or we car. We go from one place to another. We go from house to office, office to somewhere else, like that. Okay. So Arjun is asking all this because then by the power of knowledge we can develop detachment. We sometimes get carried away with this field of activity, this body itself. We get carried away. This is my body. How do I look? What should I wear? We have to take care of our body. That's fine. But we become carried away in sense we are fully focused on it, and then we neglect our spiritual life. So we need to balance it out. So that's why knowledge is given. How much of the body is to be needed, how to utilize it, and keep the goal of this whole body also, utilizing this body in spiritual life. Otherwise, this body is like a car. Okay, why do we need a car? To go from one place to another. But suppose somebody just takes it for a ride and he's driving very fast, and if we ask him, why are you driving this fast? Where are you going? And he says, I don't know where I'm going. I'm just driving. So that goalless activity is waste of time. So that's why we need knowledge, where we need to go and when and how to use this car effectively. Sometimes people meet accidents, sometimes they damage their car. Similarly, we may damage our body. We may do some accidents and all that with this body, right? By misutilizing it. And we will discuss in three modes of material nature. Out of eating foodstuffs which are bad to this body, hmm? Doing things which are again bad to this body, and then our activities, they don't help us in our ultimate goal of spiritual life, Krishna consciousness. So we need this all kind of knowledge. So that's why Arjuna is asking this knowledge. Hmm? Okay, I'll continue from here. In the first six chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Person of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul in regards to devotion service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the living entity are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entity is subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness they are suffering. When when enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in various capacities as distressed, those who want money, inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. We read this in 7th chapter, right? Arthi, Artharthi, Jigyasu. So one when enlightened, then they will go towards God for want of money, or when they are in big problem, they go. Then sometimes they are just inquisitive, they just want to know things, and then sometimes they really want to search God. What is the absolute truth? So like this. Now starting with 13th chapter, how the living entity comes in contact with the material nature and how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and discharge of devotional services are explained. So the purpose of this 6th chapter from now is to know that how the living entity came in contact with the material nature. Now how it came, how it got fit in this field, and how it can deliver by the Supreme Lord through fruitive activities, then cultivation of knowledge, and how to perform devotional service in this body itself. That is the aim. Let's get to text number 3. O Scion of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower of all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So now, now Krishna says the soul is also the knower of the body, right? This is the body, the field of activity. The knower of the field is the soul. Now Krishna says, I also know about this. Why? Because he is the super soul, Paramatma, four-handed form of Vishnu, four-handed form of Krishna, So he is also knower, but there is a difference. What he says, I am also knower in all the bodies. Interestingly, use the word all bodies, not one body, but all bodies. Why? If you look at this, if you look at this, the super soul is there in all these bodies, right? And the living entity is also there in all these bodies. Now, how many living entities are there? 8.4 million species, right? You have heard this number. And how many super souls are there then? Let's say how many bodies are here? 3, 6, 7, 8, 8 and 3, 11, 11 and 3, 14, 14 and 3, 17, 17 and 3, 20, 20, yeah, 20 and 3, 23 bodies we can see here in this picture. So how many living entities are there and how many super souls are there? Can you tell me?
23 each.
Okay. So 23 bodies. How many super soul you said? Or how many living entities?
23.
23 living entities. And how many super soul? How many Paramatma?
23.
Okay. Now here is what is the difference. In this case, we have 3 bodies. Okay, in this case, we have 3 bodies. There are 3 different living entities and they are driving their own bodies. Now, there is only one four-handed form of Vishnu, right? Is that so? Is this Vishnu different from this Vishnu? And this Vishnu is different from this Vishnu?
No. Then one. Yeah.
They're one. So, how many super souls are there?
23.
No, one.
Paramatma is one. And
Yeah, only one super soul. Okay, this is the difference we need to understand. Because, see, the soul, there are many souls, right? And they are spread in many bodies. And one Supreme Lord, Krishna, he expands into super soul, and all the super soul are same only. The same super soul in your body is there in my body, is there in a dog's body, is there in all the bodies. This is the potency of the Lord. He is omnipresence. He is present everywhere. That doesn't mean that he becomes 23 of them. He remains one. And there is a nice example how this is explained. Probably I don't have that picture, but the example is given of, let's say, if we have 10 to 20 pots of water. Okay, we have 10 to 20 pots of water, and they are in the sun. Okay, now we see sun in every pot, right? In every pot of water we will see the sun. Yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So how many suns are there?
One.
Hey, but I am seeing 20 pots are there.
The same sun is falling in all the pots.
Yeah. Same sun is seen in all pots. Similarly, that one Paramatma is in all the bodies, and he is the knower of all bodies. Now you understand?
Yeah.
Okay, when Krishna says all bodies, because he is like the sun in every pot. And for us it may seem like there is a sun here also, there is sun here also, but actually it is only one sun. Okay, it has expanded in all these pots, and therefore the sun can say, I can see through all the pots. But can each pot say that I can see through this pot and that pot? No, right? The one pot can only say, I can only be aware of my own pot. Getting? So there are two knowers. One knower is only of his body, and another knower knows all the bodies. And one who knows all the bodies is called a Paramatma. Any questions on this? Any questions? Okay. Okay, so same thing was discussed in this one paragraph. Let's move forward. Okay, the individual may be knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of other bodies. Like I am knowing my body, right? But do I know your body? No. Do you know my body? No. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as Super Soul in all the bodies, knows everything that is going on in all bodies. What is going on in your body, my body, everything he knows. And another example Prabhupada gives here is that a citizen may know about his patch of land, but a king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Right? The king, the government knows everything that is going on in the whole city, in the whole state, in the whole country. Right? But all the properties possessed by the individual citizen. Okay. Similarly, one may be proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. So that's what it means. Okay, someone joined. Yeah. So now the question is, what is this body made of? What is this body made of? The body consists of senses. The supreme soul is the Rishikesha, which means controller of the senses. He is the original controller of all the senses. Just like a king is the original controller of all the activities of the state, the citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am the knower. This means that he is the super knower. And the individual soul knows only his particular body. So you must have experienced this, that we may sometimes have a land or something. Some person may have a land and he must have built a building. Okay. But now there is some road widening happening, and the government says, I need this land of yours. And the citizen cannot protest only, right? He has to give, because the government is like the super controller. Yes or no? Similarly, the super soul is like the super knower of everything, and he's the proprietor of everything. And we may be very attached to our body, but at the time of that, we have to give it up, right? Okay. This body is called Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the super soul. So, owner of the body is the individual soul, and then the Supreme Lord is the Paramatma, who knows both the body and the owner. Paramatma knows both of it. Okay, then what is perfect knowledge? Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of individual soul, and the constitution of super soul is known in Vedic terms as jnana. So when we talk about jnana means one who knows this body, one who knows super soul, and one who knows individual soul and the relationship between the two. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the super soul as one yet distinct is knowledge. This is statement. To understand soul and super soul, they are one but distinct. How they are one? Because they are the knower of the field. And how they are distinct? Krishna is the knower of, super soul is the knower of all the fields, while soul is the knower of just one field. Okay, now Prabhupada explains more about it, that there are three things, right? The nature, the enjoyer, and Ishvara. It's like the painter, the painting, and the easel. They are all used. The painting and the easel is used by the painter, and that's how they are connected to the painter. This material world, which is field of activity, is nature, and the enjoyer of the nature is the living entity, and above both of them is the supreme control, the personality of God. That's how we need to understand. Okay. 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 Similar things. Okay. Let's move to text number 4. Now, please hear my brief description of this field of activities and how it is constituted, what are the changes are, whence it is produced, and who that knower of the field of activity is, and what his influences are. A very straightforward sentence this is. What is this body made of? What changes are happening? When it gets produced? Who is the knower? What the body influences on us? Hmm? Just let me just check this. Okay. Okay. Can someone read this highlighted?
I'll read, Prabhu.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the super soul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everybody to be one with the individual soul, the Jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent.
Okay. So, when say let's say we buy a car or two-wheeler or a washing machine or a fridge, there comes a manual with it, right? And the customer person who installs, he comes, and then he starts explaining to us how to use it, right? In case of car, we start looking at the manual, how to use this button, that clutch. Hmm? In case of fridge, we want to know all the buttons that are there inside it. If it's a washing machine, there are so many buttons on it. Some 10-15 buttons are there. We want to know each of it. There's a dial which moves, right? So that is the constitution of the body. And when we know about this, then we can properly utilize it, right? So that's the purpose of knowing. Now, the thing is, the Supreme Lord also knows about this body. And he knows about all the body. So that's how we are differentiating between the super soul and us. Okay, we should never equate the potent and the impotent. Potent meaning the super soul from whom everything comes, and important is like we. From us, we are only utilizing it. Okay, we are not having the full control of it. Okay. Okay, text number 5. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of the activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all the reasoning as to cause and effect. So, this constitution of the body, the super soul, the soul, how this body changes, how karma affects it, all these things is explained in various details in Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra is a shastra, it's a scripture which Vyasadeva wrote after writing the whole of the Vedas. So I have the Vedic tree. So if you look at this, this is the whole of the Vedas that he wrote, Vyasadeva. It's divided into Shruti and Smriti. Shruti is the Supreme Lord told to in the heart of Brahma. That is called as Shruti. The Vedas, Upavedas, Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads. Actually, the 4 Vedas, the Rig, Yajur, Sama, Veda, Atharva. All this, the Supreme Lord said. Then the sages, when they learned about the Shruti, they wrote Smriti. Smriti is like history also, Itihasas, 6th Darshana, explaining, what is the knowledge given. Vedanta, Mimamsa, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya. Then, what are the Tantras, the Pancha Tantras, the Puranas, the Sutras, Dharma Shastras. That is all of the Smriti. The Itihasas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, these are the Itihasas. Out of which we are reading Bhagavad Gita, which comes in Mahabharata. So, after writing all these Vedas, he wrote Vedanta Sutra. It's a theology. Sutra means it's like very compacted form of writing where one wants to explain a lot and one uses in few lines, he tries to explain everything. So Vedanta meaning the end of the Vedas. From the end of the Vedas you will understand. Like after giving all of this, he said, I'll give you the end of the Vedas. And even after that, he was not satisfied. Then he wrote Srimad Bhagavatam on the order of his guru Narad Muni. So like that. So all this, body, constitution, everything is explained very nicely in Vedanta Sutra, and Krishna uses this. And here he speaks, and even in the 18th chapter, certain section he speaks about certain parts of the Vedanta Sutra. Okay, as the cause and the effect. What is the cause and what is the effect? Okay, can someone read?
Yes, Prabhuji, I'll read.
Someone who has not read can try.
Yeah. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the highest authority in explaining his knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to the scriptures. The Vedantas, which is accepted as authority, first he says this is according to different sages. As far as the sages
are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father,
Parashara.
Parashara, is also a great sage, and he writes in his book of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tathane. You,
I.
where are we? VUI and the various other living entities are all transcendental through in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher level and some are in the lower nature. The higher are and the lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the super soul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, and distinction between the soul and the super soul and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this, and Parasara is considered principal among them.
Yeah. So two things. Why did Krishna talk about Vedanta? Because it is the authorized scripture. See, Krishna is the Supreme Lord. So technically, he need not tell anything how I'm talking about from this book or something. Because he's the Supreme Lord, the whole knowledge comes from him. But still he says, I'm talking from this book. Why? Because he he approves the way of the previous sages. Okay, it is not like he derides and he says I'm giving you knowledge which is even the sages and the previous it is not out of syllabus, it is within the syllabus, something like that. So he's specified that whatever he's saying is already there in the Vedas. Okay, and great sages have already talked about it and I am just repeating it. Hmm? So so Krishna is not talking anything of out of syllabus in Bhagavad Gita. Everything is there in the Vedas. Okay. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of Yajurveda, describes nature, living entity, and the supreme personality of Godhead. So there are various Upanishads, and they describe all these things. Nature, the living entity, and the supreme personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two Kshetragyas. There are two knowers of the Kshetra. There are two knowers of the field of activities. Who are there? The individual living entity and the supreme living entity. That is Paramatma. As stated in Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahma Pucham Pratishtaha. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya. Okay. Okay. Can someone read this? There is a manifestation of Supreme Lords. Anyone? Can anyone read?
I can read again, Prabhu, if you are okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Paramatma, Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or living forms. In Jnanamaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization called Vijnanamaya, in which the living entity, mind, the life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is the Anandamaya, realization of all blissful nature. Thus, there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahma Pucham. Out of these, the first three, which are called Brahma Pocham, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, involve the fields of activities of living entities.
Okay, so so what is explained here is when the living entity comes in this material world, he takes a body. Okay, he gets trapped in a body, and now he has to experience the Supreme Lord. So he starts experiencing it this way. First way is he experiences as Annamaya through the agency of food. Food is the subsistence, on which I am living. So you will see, when baby is born, it is only focused where is the food. Nothing else it wants. It only wants the food. It eats and sleeps, right? And if it doesn't get food, it cries. But once it gets food, it sleeps. So our whole experience at that point is Annamaya, dependence on food. And that's how we seek the Supreme Lord. Then slowly we grow. And then we start looking, oh, there are many people around me. And that is called as Pranamaya. We understand that there are different kinds of living entities around me. This is my father, this is my mother. First mother, then the mother said this is father, then brother, sister, grandfather, grandmother, like that we start experiencing. And then as we grow, we then start thinking our own and having feeling and willing. I want to do this, I feel like this. So that is also experience of the Supreme Lord. And then we come to a stage of Vijnanamaya that needs some practice. Vijnanamaya. Why? Because there one has Brahman realization. Where the first thing the living entity understands is that I am different than the body. I'm the soul. When he understands that, that is the Vijnanamaya. And when he lives on that platform that I am the soul and these are my activities, that is called as Anandamaya. So these are the 5 stages of Brahman realization, out of which first 3 stages are material activities dealing with the fields of activity, and then Vijnanamaya Anandamaya is the spiritual activities. So can you tell me what are the spiritual activities in Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya? What do you understand? What are the activities in Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya? Any idea?
So, Anandamaya is like we are not the body, we are the soul.
That is Vijnanamaya.
So that is Vijnanamaya. Okay. Anandamaya is bliss, like complete.
So what is the activity?
When you get inclined towards meditation and
Healing.
Yeah. Healing.
What you said?
Feeling.
Feeling. Well, feeling is covered in Jnanamaya. There is thinking, feeling and willing. In Anandamaya, so Vijnanamaya is we just know that there is soul, there is super soul, there is material world, everything. And Anandamaya is to live on the platform of the soul. So what kind of activities happen in Anandamaya? See, this is start of spiritual life. We get some knowledge. Then we start living that knowledge. We utilize that knowledge. We start living that knowledge. We start doing something by which we get Ananda. What is that Ananda? Which is not an activity of the body, but it is done using the body, but we get Ananda. Ananda is spiritual pleasure. How many of you attended Rath Yatra last 2 days back?
I have attended Prabhuji.
Yeah. So what all we were doing in Rath Yatra?
Serving the Lord, Prabhuji.
How?
With bhogas or with any other way.
Okay. Yeah, what are ways that we
Singing,
serve
singing
God?
the Kirtan, Harinam Sankirtan.
Yeah, singing Harinam, pulling the rath, right? Serving devotees,
Dancing for the Lord.
dancing. Anything more? Very important thing you missed. Without that, no program is complete. What is the last thing we do in the program? Let's say if you go to some home program or temple program, what is the last thing that happens?
Bhoga, prasadam.
Prasadam.
Yeah, prasadam. We honor prasadam. We eat prasadam, honor prasadam, right? So these activities which are externally looking like, oh, this is singing, everyone can sing. This is pulling rath, no, everyone can pull. Serving devotees, everyone can serve somebody or the other. Dancing, these are actually on the platform of the soul. Okay, chanting the holy name, we use our material body, we use our tongue, which is flesh, we use our ears, which is another flesh, we use our bones in it, and we chant. But because it is connected with the supreme, it is a spiritual activity, and that gives us ananda, spiritual bliss. And that's why we feel happy when we do all these things. Yes or no? No? What do you say? Do we feel happy by doing all these things or no?
Yes,
Yes, Prabhu.
happy and satisfied.
So someone can say, you see, you are singing, I also can sing in some movie songs and all that. You are pulling the rath, I also can pull things. You are serving some people, I also can serve. You are honoring prasadam, I can eat. You are dancing, I'll also dance. What is the difference then? How will you say?
Bhava,
All these activities anyone can do without
bhava,
Krishna.
serving attitude, bhava.
He can say, I can serve old people, poor people. What's the point? How to differentiate that and this? So all these activities are connected to Krishna. That is the super soul. Okay, that is the difference, and therefore we get ananda. And this ananda is not material ananda, it is spiritual ananda. Why? Because Krishna is spiritual, and when we do things in relation to him, we get Krishna's ananda, which is on spiritual platform. And that's how these things, these activities where one may think, external man may think, oh, this is all I can also do, but he won't get ananda, he will get material ananda. Some pleasure he will get, but it will be material, it won't be spiritual in nature. We are doing all these things for serving Krishna, pleasing Krishna, and therefore we get spiritual. So like this, we slowly grow in our spiritual life to understand Brahma Pucham. Okay, so that's how we move from Annamaya to Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, and Vijnanamaya, and then finally Anandamaya. So spiritual life means Anandamaya, Vijnanamaya, and then Anandamaya. Okay, let's go to this verse. Any questions on that? Okay, so the great five. So now, what is this body made of? That is the question. So this is 6 and 7. 6 and 7. Okay, the five great elements: false ego, false ego, intelligence, and then
Panchabhuta and then
yes,
Mind, intelligence, and ego.
Mind, intelligence, ego, that all is there. Okay, the five sense objects is there, and then this body gives us some there is a subtle what do you say, subtle experiences. What are those? There is desire, hatred, happiness, distress,
Conflict.
aggregate, the life symptoms, conviction. All of these are also the field of activities. So there are two types of activities happening, right? The interaction of the gross elements and the interaction of the subtle elements, which create all this desire, hatred, happiness, distress, life symptoms, convictions. Okay, so these are all but the field of activities. What all we do in this world, in this body, we use those five elements. And we have this range of desires, hatred, happiness, distress, experiences, all that, right? These are the two things mainly we are doing in this body. Agree? Okay. Okay, so yeah, where are we? One is okay. So the components of the worlds can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, ether. There are five great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and unmanifested stage of the three modes of material nature. Then there are five senses, acquiring senses, working senses. Acquiring senses are you acquire. You acquire knowledge, you acquire information through your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Then work. Use them to give output, voice, leg, hands, anals, genitals. Then above the senses, there is mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. It's like a software. It is a senses only, but it's like a software. If someone says where is the software in your mobile, it is there everywhere in the mobile. You cannot pinpoint it. You can pinpoint the processor, you can pinpoint the mic, you can pinpoint the speaker, but the software, you will say it is everywhere. It is running through all these wires. The mind is like that. Therefore, mind, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are five objects of the senses. What the senses are using, are doing the smelling, tasting, form, touch, sound. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activities. So this is what is all the field of activities happening. What are we doing? We are smelling, taste, we are touching, form, and sound. If one can make an analytical study of these 24 elements, then he can very well understand the field of activities. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, distress, which are interactions, representatives of the five great elements of the grass body. So using this 24 elements, when we smell, taste, form, sound, touch, we experience various experiences like desire, hatred, happiness, distress. Suppose we touch a pointed object, we'll feel distressed, right? But let's say if we touch something which is very soft, there will be some happiness feeling in it. And someone slaps us, then we'll feel hate. And if we want something, I want to touch that, I want to eat that, then desire is there, like that. So all these elements are working together and they are giving us this experiences. Okay, the living symptoms represented by consciousness and convictions are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle bodies are included within the field of activities. um, hmm. The five great elements are the gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called as the materialistic conception or the tamasi buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the three modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes are called as pradhanam. And this is very technical thing. I'll just finish this and explain. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with the interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. So about these three modes, right? We have one chapter, and we have certain sections in 17th and 18th chapter about the three modes. But that is still considered small. Hmm? There are other scriptures which give more detail to it. Bhagavad Gita, it's a summary only. This body is the representative of all these factors, and then there are changes in the body, which are six in number. So, what all changes happen in the body? The body is born, It grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, and then it begins to decay, and at last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, its proprietor is different. So, from this whole explanation, what are we trying to understand? From this whole explanation, we are just trying to understand that the body is made of gross elements. Gross means material elements. They have a start and an end, and this body is born, and at the end it vanishes. In between, it grows, it produces byproducts, becomes decayed, and last it goes away. Okay, this is our everyday experience. Where it is? Yeah, it it grows, it becomes young, then it slowly decays, and then it just goes away. So why this knowledge is given? So that we can develop detachment from this body, and we can develop an attitude that okay, this body is anyway going to be given up, so I better utilize it, and I utilize it for the right purpose, so as to achieve the highest goal, that is spiritual life. That's why all this knowledge is given. So let's open up for some questions. Any questions or comment anyone has on today's topic of any topic that you want to ask? Any questions or comment? It's 8:30. Um, any questions or comment? Okay, so no questions. So